I offer to you a history of Veterans Day, the beginning, from a grandfather's memory. As the men reached a predetermined spot, they were stopped and searched. Even in the dim light from my vantage point of a rail car, I could see the look of resignation on some of their faces, disgust and even haughtiness on the faces of others who would never admit defeat. As a young man, I expected the leaders of the German army to look like giant ogres, but to my surprise, the men entering the rail car looked just like ordinary humans, some short, some tall. But regardless, their purpose for being here was historic. They were here to sign a declaration of armistice, putting an end to the war to end all wars. The anticipation I felt was mounting so that my heart felt as if it would leap from my chest at any moment. The world would never see another war was running through my mind. At 5 a.m., November 11, 1918, I witnessed signatures being applied to the document. Now it was only 6 hours until the fighting completely stopped. Far away, the artillery could still be heard, using up rounds so munitions would not have to be packed up and shipped back to the depot. Somehow, knowing what was to come, it seemed the noise was louder. On the final stroke of the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of the year 1918, the guns of Europe fell silent, and that silence was deafening. After 4 years of the most bitter and devastating fighting, the Great War was finally over. But it was not until 1938 that Congress passed a bill that each November 11th shall be dedicated to the cause of world peace, and hereafter celebrated and known as Armistice Day. In many communities, the American Legion was in charge of the observance, which included parades and religious services. At 11 a.m., all traffic stopped in tribute to the dead. Then volleys were fired and taps sounded. If the realization of the idealistic hope that World War I was the war to end all wars, November 11th might still be called Armistice Day. Only a few years after the proclaiming of the holiday, war broke out in Europe again. World War II was upon us, and my father became an active participant in the second hope that this would really end all wars. However, it was not to be. The Korean War followed closely behind and introduced my youngest uncle to war. The Vietnam War followed in 1961, where my turn in the family rotation came. There have been many more since then. Realizing that peace was equally preserved by veterans of World War II in Korea, Congress made an occasion to honor those who had served America in all wars. In 1954, when I was just beginning second grade, President Eisenhower signed a bill proclaiming November 11th as Veterans Day. Leading up to that point were several events. After World War II, there were many new veterans who had little or no association with World War I. The word armistice means simply a truce. Therefore, as years passed, the significance of the name of this holiday changed. Leaders of veterans groups decided to try to correct this and make November 11th the time to honor everyone who had fought in all of America's wars, not just World War I. In Emporia, Kansas, on November 11, 1953, instead of an Armistice Day program, there was a Veterans Day observance. Ed Reese of Emporia was so impressed that he introduced a bill into the Kansas House to change the name to Veterans Day. After this passed, Mr. Reese wrote to all state governors and asked their approval and cooperation in observing the changed holiday. I was 7 years old when the name was changed to Veterans Day by Act of Congress on May 24, 1954. President Eisenhower referred to the change of name to Veterans Day in honor of the servicemen and women of all America's wars. In 1968, well into my first enlistment in the Air Force, a law was passed which changed the national commemoration of Veterans Day to the fourth Monday in October. It soon became apparent, however, that November 11 was a matter of historic and patriotic significance to a great number of our citizens. It was 1978, 10 years later, that the observance of this special day returned to its traditional date enacted by legislation, Public Law 94-97, which brings us to today.